Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to be modelling a marble column and then texturing it using a procedural technique. So to begin with, I've just shortened a cube and I'm now subdividing it 7 times on the X and Y axis. Control Shift to shortest path select the top faces and then inset them slightly. Use Circle from Loop Tools and then scale it in. Okay, next we're going to extrude it up slightly on the Z axis. Okay, and then we're going to scale it, extrude it again on the Z axis and then cancel it and then scale it in slightly. Then do the same procedure again, extrude, cancel, scale it in slightly and then extrude it up. Just going to make out the bottom part of the column here. Okay, and then extrude it up to give it some height. That looks about right. Okay, shade smooth. And then we're going to split the view between the 3D viewport and a shader window. Change the 3D viewport to a rendered view. Just going to disable the floor and let's set up an environment texture. So just loading in an HDRI. I'm going to set that to 0.4 and then under Filmic in the renders properties we're going to turn the transparent on so we can't see it. Okay, over in the 3D viewport we're going to add a plane for a floor and then just scale it up a bunch of times. Okay, going to give the floor a dark, slightly reflective material just so we've got some contrast with the main subject. Okay, for the column itself we're going to add a new material, and the first thing we're going to do is add a Voronoi texture. With Control Shift click you can preview the material in the viewport. That's with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. Adding in the mapping coordinates. We're going to change that to distance to edge and then change the mapping coordinates to object. Next we're going to add in a noise texture. This is to give some variation to the lines generated by the Voronoi. Just moving these over to give myself a bit more space to work. Then we're going to drop in a mix RGB and plug the vector into color 2 and crank the factor up to around 0.8 just so it slightly distorts the shapes of the lines. Next we're going to use a color ramp, place that between the Voronoi texture and the shader, and we're going to crank the white value down. This controls how thick the cracks are going to be. Just going to move these down here. Okay, then we're going to add in a bump node and plug the color ramp into the height and the normal into the normal of the main shader, and you can see that's given us the indents from the Voronoi texture as cracks in the surface. You can use the white value on the color ramp to make the cracks thinner. Next, we're going to duplicate the majority of the nodes we've got so far and plug that into the base color. And then we're going to remove the mix shader and plug the vector from the noise straight into the Voronoi. This is so that we don't get the color information in exactly the same place as the cracks. Okay, then we're going to change the scale slightly. Just so you get that streaky effect going through the smooth parts of the marble. And because this is procedural, any editing you do to the geometry will automatically update with the texture. So all the cracks and the streaks from the marble will apply to everything. You can even boolean extra objects onto the column. If you wanted a large sphere resting on the top of it, you can have that do the exact same thing. Just fine tuning the size of the streaks. You can make them darker by moving the black slider. You can also give them a different colour. You quite often get with coloured ornate marble columns like these, you'll get greens, blues, occasionally reds, golds and greens in there. And go for a sort of slightly dark green. Next we're going to add in an ambient occlusion map, ambient occlusion node, sorry. And we're going to plug that straight into a colour ramp. And then if we increase the black slider to the right, you can see it thickens up where the ambient occlusion is affecting. Next we need a mix RGB shader. I'm going to drop that onto the ambient occlusion and plug the colour into the second one. We're going to then multiply the ambient occlusion over the top of the colour data. Plug that in, and you can see we've now got nice shadows in the geometry around the bottom of the column there. Just going to adjust the size of the cracks slightly. You can play with the scale factor of the cracks if you only want fewer cracks over the thing as a whole. You can make the scale smaller, and it will stretch them out over a larger area. And you can then make them thinner again with the white slider in the colour ramp. Next I'm just going to add a bevel shader into the normal slot. This just softens some of the edges of the column, particularly around the base, and you might need to adjust the radius for how far away it is. I think the cube we started with was 2 meters square, so it's quite large. Okay, next we're going to drop the roughness marble like this is usually quite reflective. Usually you go for about a 0.1 or a 0.2. I can just change the colour here if I want to, make it more blue than green. So it's got blue streaks going through the marble. Just going to make the cracks a lot thinner by moving the white slider to the left. That's looking pretty good. Okay, and I hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching and take care.